All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here, and we are continuing in the series. Almost done here. Almost done going over the hard to kill methodology, which is our blend of programming, performance, and longevity. So we've covered a lot of areas. I'm not going to rehash them now. If you want to dive into the series, just scroll back. They're all labeled, but this is part 12, and then we will get into part 13, and then ultimately I'll be announcing Project Delta, kind of the direction we're headed with some of our programming. But let's get into it. So today is mixed modal aerobic training. So mixed modal aerobic training is, if you were to think of CrossFit, that's what most people think of, but I'm going to go way more into the weeds and the details of this and how it's not CrossFit. But that's what you can think of. It's mixed modality aerobic training. So it's not very high intensity and doesn't need to be. Think of this as something that could go in place of running, biking, rowing, because that's all anyone ever does typically when they think about conditioning or programming aerobic endurance. Is how far can I run? Can I do zone 2? Can I do 5 miles? Can I do a bike today? Can I do a row today? It's because there's the endurance world, and that's where all these endurance athletes come from, and that's where all of this knowledge base is in triathlon training, marathon training, all these longer endurance, ultra marathon training, all of these longer endurance programs. But no one's really looking at mixed modal aerobic as like, hey, what if I do a farmer carry with a kettlebell, do a couple of burpees, and then, hit the rower after that? Like, what if I mix all these together and I do that for a prolonged period of time? What if I do that for 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes? And I'm looking at my heart rate and I'm trying to keep my heart rate in a certain zone, maybe zone 2. This is where we have a lot of unanswered questions. I personally believe this is some of the best possible training that you can do, period, hands down. And the reason being is because you can take mixed modal aerobic training and you can blend it in multiple different ways. You can say, all right, I'm going to do a zone 2 mixed modal aerobic training session today. And so what you're hitting on when you do that is you're able to basically get some sort of like strength base in there. You're also getting an aerobic base, and you're going at a specific zone. There's a lot of like people talking about zone 2 training, and they're like, well, zone 2 has to be, on a bike or running. It's like, why? Why can't it just be low intensity mixed modality training? And the answer is we just don't have a lot of research on it. This is not like one that's, backed by science to a large degree. We've tried pulling it from all these different areas, but it's just not there. But what we know from our own experience is that this is an incredibly good way to program for athletes to get results in all areas. And so the reason I say that it's CrossFit, opening with an example, is just to help you understand like how they go back to back. But the ways that it's not CrossFit is a lot of times we might set in work to rest ratios that we went over in the oxidative energy system part of this series, or it'll be incredibly low intensity. And that's not CrossFit at all. Typically, CrossFit doesn't have rest periods. It doesn't have low intensity. They don't tell you to do low intensity things for long duration. So mixed modal aerobic training, I think I want to tell you how to program it, but I think I want to like jump into ultimately why you should be doing it. Why you should be doing it is efficiency. Efficiency. Like I said, you could only train twice per week or something like that. This is like something I would recommend for that type of person who just needs to be incredibly efficient, because you can hit every energy system. You can do a mixed modal aerobic high intensity. You can do a mixed modal aerobic low intensity. You can add squats. You can add burpees. You could add bicep curls. And you're just blending all of these things, but no one really wants to do it. The reason I think these types of workouts are gaining more popularity, but the real reason they're not talked about that much is because the bodybuilder just wants to build his body. The endurance athlete just wants to run. The CrossFitter just wants to go as hard as they can all the time. But if we're talking about just a human being, we're talking about performance and longevity in life, this is such an amazing way to go about fitness. So let's talk about programming it. I like to also describe this as just grunt work to people who are unfamiliar. It's just like do work at a sustained heart rate for a long time. And the format we follow is typically kind of that WGM is like one of the acronyms that we follow. So weightlifting, gymnastics, body weight. So you can start by just selecting 3 exercises. That's the most basic way of doing something like this. So weightlifting, gymnastics, body weight, or WGM, weightlifting, gymnastics, monostructural, WGM, monostructural, and I'll go over that. So if I were to just program one here on the spot, you would take a weightlifting exercise. It can be any kind of weight. It doesn't not necessarily have to be like Olympic weightlifting. You could say back squat. You could say kettlebell swing. You could say Mace 360. Like you could do anything that is adding an implement for resistance. So don't get too hung up on the weightlifting having to be weightlifting. It can be anything that adds resistance, but it makes sure that you don't forget to have some sort of resistance component. So this could be anything like with a barbell, with a kettlebell, with a wall ball, anything like that. So that's the weightlifting side of that. So you'd select, okay, I'm going to do weighted lunges, and I'm going to do 16 total steps, lunge steps, and that's my first exercise. Okay, we got the W there. Then the gymnastics, again, doesn't have to be like a gymnastic movement. It's more to us body weight style. So it's like, okay, I'm going to do my lunges with a barbell, weighted lunges, and then my gymnastics movement, I think I want to do some push-ups. Okay, do push-ups. Let's say you're going to do 30 push-ups. So now we have our lunges, we have our push-ups, and then we go to monostructural. And this is where you get some of that sustained heart rate. Monostructural is typically one activity like an endurance athlete would do. So that could be biking, that could be rowing, that could be running. And so say you were like, you know what, I want to run 200 meters, 400 meters, whatever it is, at a moderate pace. Now you have the full workout. So you do the lunges, you do the push-ups, then you do the run. And where you get to really play with this is the intensity level. If you want to do threshold aerobic training, you can go hard. You can say, I want to do this for 15 minutes and I want to go all out. And so you can absolutely do that. You can just go all out. You have a high intensity threshold training session here. You're going to be having high heart rate. You're going to be hitting muscular endurance, strength, a lot of different areas. But if you're like, you know what? I don't want to go hard, but I also don't like running zone 2. I want to do zone 2. So set your zone 2 heart rate parameters and go through this and start with 40 minutes and say, I'm going to go through this for 40 minutes. And that means you're just going to go through it at a slower pace. So you do the lunges, and then if your heart rate got really jacked, maybe you're like, okay, I'm going to rest a little bit. Now I'm going to do the push-ups. And then when I run this 400 meter or this 200 meters, I'm going to really jog. I'm not going to go super hard. So the only thing that dictates the intensity is what your goal is. So if you are trying to get aerobic threshold training, you go harder for shorter duration. If you want zone 2 training, you just go longer with, less intensity overall. And you get to decide what this is. It's such a flexible training modality. And you don't have to be like getting stuck into this like, okay, well, does it just always have to be 3 things? Absolutely not. This is the very base level of like mixed modal aerobic training. You could do that twice. You could say, I'm going to do WGM. So you have the lunge, the push-up, the 200-meter run, and then then you add in something else. You're like, then I have bench press, and then I have pull-up, and then I have ski erg. And you could do all 6 of those and run through that. And that's really kind of how I recommend when you get into the, okay, I want to do 40 minutes of this, 50 minutes of this, 60 minutes of this zone 2, is I would stretch it out to probably 6 exercises, still following that same format, because ultimately it's going to, you'll see more progress that way, and it's easier to do something like that for 60 minutes or 50 minutes. And then if you're going to go shorter intensity, just 3 exercises, go through them, shorter duration, higher intensity, go 3 exercises and knock them out as fast as you can. But like I said, mixed modal aerobic training is just a great way to go about it. You can add rest times in there. You can control your heart rate. You can select your exercises based off of what your goals are. You can still build some muscular endurance, power in these. Like, it's a really great way to go about it without always having to hit high intensity or without having to always go for a run for your aerobic training. There's a lot of benefits here, and I highly recommend you do it frequently. And it's a big thing. It's a big part of our programming over at Garage Gym Athlete. And all of our athletes out there, you know what I'm talking about. You've done these workouts. You've done the grunt work, training things that we've done. You've done all of these things. But if you're not one of our athletes and you want to be a part of this, head over to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a free trial, and we would love to have you. But that's it for this one. Remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you.